Welcome to the Partardez channel. Today we explain Prophets Kings 2, chapter 23 in a clear and simple way, step by step. We're diving into one of the most intense, action-packed chapters in the entire Tanakh. Seriously, it's a massive turning point. So, to set the brief context for our deep, unhurried study today, we really need to understand exactly where we are in the story. Right now, we're at a moment of immense, undeniable hope. If you recall, in the previous chapter, they were repairing the Holy Temple, and during those repairs, the high priest Hilkiah literally stumbles upon the long-lost Book of the Law. Upon hearing its words read aloud, King Josiah actually tears his robes in profound repentance. He suddenly realizes just how far the nation has strayed from God's commands. So now in chapter 23, King Josiah is about to launch the most sweeping, literal purge of idolatry in the history of Judah. He's not just feeling bad, he's taking immediate, decisive action based strictly on what he just read. Here is our roadmap for today's explainer. First, the covenant is renewed. Second, purging the land of idols. Third, an unprecedented Passover. Fourth, Josiah's spiritual legacy. Fifth, tragedy and Egyptian control. And finally, key takeaways. Part 1, the covenant is renewed, uniting the people. We start off in verses 1 through 3. And the very first thing King Josiah does, he calls a massive national assembly. He summons all the elders of Judah and Jerusalem. Then he goes right up to the temple of the Lord, and he brings absolutely everyone with him, the men of Judah, the people of Jerusalem, the priests, and the prophets. Just imagine standing in that crowd for a second. The text specifically notes that he brings everyone from the least to the greatest. Nobody is left out. It's this incredible moment of total national unification around this newly discovered text. Step by step, Josiah stands there and reads the entire text aloud for everyone to hear, all the words of the Book of the Covenant that had literally just been found in the temple. Then, the text tells us the king stands by the pillar. Now, in this biblical context, standing by the pillar wasn't just finding a place to lean. It was a formal position of royal authority and deep solemnity. From this spot, he makes a highly personal vow right there in the presence of the Lord. He commits to follow the Lord and to keep his commands, regulations, and decrees with his whole heart and his whole soul. And the amazing part? He doesn't do this alone. He successfully leads the entire nation to pledge themselves to this renewed covenant. They all stand together, confirming the words written in the book. It's a truly powerful scene. Moving to part 2, purging the land of idols, a methodical cleansing. Immediately following that unified pledge, we get into verses 4 through 20. And honestly, this part brilliantly illustrates the difference between just saying you're sorry and actually putting in the work to fix the problem. The text describes an aggressive, highly physical, and just incredibly systematic destruction of centuries of entrenched pagan worship across the entire land. Josiah gives the order to Hilkiah, the high priest, the secondary priests, and the doorkeepers to start the cleanup right at the absolute center, the temple of the Lord in Jerusalem. When you catalog the sheer volume of idolatry that had managed to infiltrate this holy site, it's frankly staggering. But Josiah attacks it methodically. He starts by grabbing all the articles dedicated to the pagan god Baal, the goddess Asherah, and the starry hosts, which basically means astrology, and he hauls them directly out of the Lord's temple. He doesn't just toss them in a corner, he drags them outside the city and burns them in the fields of the Kidron Valley, and even carries their ashes all the way to Bethel. He completely removes the pagan priests appointed by previous kings. He takes the actual carved Asherah pole right out of the temple, burns it in the Kidron Valley, grinds it down to absolute powder, and scatters that dust over the graves of the common people. Why? To permanently defile it. He even tears down the quarters of the male shrine prostitutes that were, incredibly, operating right inside the temple complex, where women wove hangings for Asherah. And he doesn't stop there. He removes horses dedicated to the sun from the temple entrance and literally burns the sun chariots. This is a total root and branch clearing of the site. Pausing for a second on verse 10 to clarify a pretty complex and honestly a very dark term, the text moves to a place called Topheth in the valley of Ben Hinnom, which is located just outside the city walls. The text states that Josiah desecrated it, so no one could ever again use it to sacrifice their son or daughter in the fire to the pagan deity Molech. So the absolute crucial point to understand here is that this was not just some metaphorical worship. Previous generations were actually engaging in the horrific, literal act of child sacrifice. By deliberately defiling the area, likely by spreading garbage or human remains over it, Josiah ensures that it can never, ever be considered a sacred site for these terrible rituals again. If we track Josiah's geographic movement in verses 8 and 9, we see his reform expanding radially outward, kind of like a shockwave. He starts at ground zero in the capital, cleansing the temple. Then he moves to the immediate valleys around Jerusalem, Kidron and Ben Hinnom. Next, he brings the priests from the surrounding towns of Judah and actually desecrates the high places from Geba all the way down to Beersheba. In simple terms, that means from the very northern tip to the very southern tip of the kingdom of Judah. He's breaking down shrines right at the city gates. But wait, he doesn't stop at his own borders. He extends this massive purge northward into Bethel and even pushes into the northern territories of Samaria to take down shrines built by the former kings of Israel. Now, notice how the text names specific kings from the past whose legacies Josiah is actively dismantling. In verses 13 and 14, Josiah desecrates the high places east of Jerusalem on the Hill of Corruption. These were ancient shrines built centuries earlier by King Solomon himself for the foreign deities of his wives, specifically Ashtoreth of the Sidonians, Chemosh of Moab, and Molech of Ammon. Josiah smashes the sacred stones, cuts down the Asherah poles, and literally covers the sites with human bones to defile them. After that, he travels to Bethel. Here, he completely demolishes the infamous altar and high place made by Jeroboam. Jeroboam was the very first king of the divided northern kingdom of Israel, and this was the specific altar that famously caused Israel to sin. Josiah burns the high place, grinds it to powder, and burns the Asherah pole there as well. Let's move into verses 15 through 18, because this builds into an absolutely incredible historical full-circle moment. As Josiah is defiling the altar at Bethel, he looks around the hillside and spots some tombs. He orders the bones removed from them and burns those human bones right on the altar. According to the plain, simple meaning of the law of Moses, contact with a human corpse makes things ritually impure. So by doing this, he's making the altar permanently unclean. But right as he's doing this, he spots a specific tombstone. He asks the men of the city, "Hey, what is that monument?" They tell him it marks the tomb of a man of God who came from Judah generations ago. This prophet had actually foretold these exact actions against the altar of Bethel. Josiah immediately commands, "Leave it alone, don't let anyone disturb his bones." So they intentionally spare his bones alongside the bones of another prophet buried there. The literal fulfillment of that ancient prophecy unfolds exactly as it was spoken. Josiah then continues right into Samaria, slaughtering the pagan priests on their own altars, before finally wrapping up and heading back to Jerusalem. Part 3. An unprecedented Passover, the spiritual peak. Having violently cleansed the physical land of its impurities, the narrative hits a massive spiritual high point in verses 21 through 23. Because, it's never enough to just remove the bad stuff. You have to reinstate the good. So the king commands all the people to celebrate the Passover to the Lord their God, ensuring they do it exactly as it is written in the newly found book of the covenant. This massive Passover in Jerusalem was held in the 18th year of Josiah's reign. And the text makes a truly stunning declaration right here. It says that not since the days of the judges who led Israel, nor throughout all the days of the kings of Israel and the kings of Judah, had any such Passover been observed. Think about that. What made this so incredibly unique was the strict, centralized adherence to the newly found book of the covenant. It shifted worship completely away from all those scattered local shrines and brought everyone back to Jerusalem. It was a historic, completely unparalleled unifying event that recentered the entire nation's worship on the exact word of God. Part 4, Josiah's spiritual legacy, unmatched devotion. Verses 24 and 25 basically summarize the ultimate extent of Josiah's domestic cleansing. Because he pushed far beyond just the public temples and state-sponsored high places, he went deep into society to root out hidden and personal occult practices among the general population. To keep our understanding really simple and grounded in the plain text of verse 24, Josiah completely got rid of the mediums and spiritists, the household gods, which are sometimes called teraphim, the idols, and all the other detestable things seen throughout Judah and Jerusalem. So mediums and spiritists were basically individuals who practiced divination or falsely claimed to consult the dead, which was explicitly 100% forbidden by the law of Moses. People would also keep household gods in their homes, kind of for personal luck or protection. Josiah banished all of these practices and items. He did this strictly to fulfill the plain, literal requirements of the law that had been discovered by Hilkiah the priest. No half measures. Verse 25 provides the ultimate summary of King Josiah's life, and you really have to think about the magnitude of this statement. The text declares him the absolute zenith of righteous kings, saying, "Neither before nor after Josiah was there a king like him who turned to the Lord as he did, with all his heart and with all his soul and with all his strength, in accordance with all the law of Moses." If those words sound super familiar, it's because they directly echo the famous Shema prayer in Deuteronomy, to love God with all your heart, soul, and strength. He adhered to the law without a single drop of compromise. Just incredible devotion. Part 5. Tragedy and Egyptian Control. The Historical Turn. Okay, so despite this incredible spiritual peak, we take a really sharp, sudden turn in verses 26 through 37. The narrative hits us with a shocking and frankly depressing historical reality regarding the doomed fate of Judah. Everything seems to be going perfectly, right? But history, well, it has a way of catching up. The text presents a tragic, almost jarring contrast in verses 26 and 27. It explicitly says, "Nevertheless, the Lord did not turn away from the heat of his fierce anger, which burned against Judah because of all that Manasseh had done to provoke him to anger." So the tragic reality is that even Josiah's perfect, unmatched devotion could not quench God's fierce, lingering anger over the immense evils, the rampant idolatry, and the innocent blood shed by Josiah's grandfather, King Manasseh. The systemic rot introduced by Manasseh had essentially permanently corrupted the nation's foundation. It made exile inevitable. The Lord declares he will completely remove Judah from his presence, just as he removed Israel, and he will reject Jerusalem and the temple itself. The judgment was already locked in, despite the reforms. And then, this amazing era of hope ends violently and abruptly in verses 29 and 30. While Josiah is still king, the Egyptian pharaoh Necho marches his army north toward the Euphrates River to assist the king of Assyria. For reasons the text doesn't fully spell out for us, King Josiah marches his own forces out to intercept him in battle. They face off at Megiddo, and Pharaoh Necho kills Josiah right there on the spot. Just like that, the great reforming king is dead. It's a huge shock. His servants carry his dead body in a chariot from the battlefield of Megiddo all the way back to Jerusalem, and they bury him in his own tomb. Instantly, the nation is plunged right back into chaos and immense, terrifying vulnerability. The chapter concludes from verse 31 to 37 with a rapid, just devastating political collapse. The people of the land take Josiah's 23-year-old son, Jehoahaz, they anoint him, and they make him king in his father's place. But immediately, literally right out of the gate, the text tells us he did evil in the eyes of the Lord. He reverts entirely to the wicked ways of his ancestors, completely abandoning everything his father Josiah had just spent his life building. The sheer speed of this collapse really highlights the true tragedy of the whole narrative arc. Jehoahaz reigned for a mere 3 months. 3 months. That is all it took before Pharaoh Necho flexed his geopolitical muscle. The pharaoh put Jehoahaz in chains at Riblah, completely stripping the nation of its sovereignty so that he could not reign in Jerusalem anymore. He then took Jehoahaz away as a captive to Egypt, where he eventually died. So as a result, Judah is now firmly and squarely under Egyptian control. To completely cement this control, Pharaoh Necho imposed a crushing financial levy on Judah. We're talking 100 talents of silver and 1 talent of gold. To put that into perspective, that is an astronomical sum that would essentially bankrupt the entire kingdom. Pharaoh Necho then installs another of Josiah's sons, Eliakim, as his new puppet king, and even flexes his power by changing his name to Jehoiakim. To actually pay this massive tribute to a foreign power, Jehoiakim is forced to brutally tax his own people. He exactingly assesses everyone in the land for their silver and gold. Jehoiakim reigns for 11 years and, just like his brother, the text notes he did evil in the eyes of the Lord. So we see that the great sweeping reform of Josiah has completely, totally unraveled, both politically and spiritually. Part 6, Key Takeaways, Lessons from the Text. Before we wrap up our step-by-step study today, let's just take a moment to distill the practical life lessons and the simple core ideas we can apply from the plain meaning of this dramatic, really heavy history we've just walked through together. The first big thing we learn here is that genuine repentance isn't just a feeling, right? It requires sweeping physical action. Josiah didn't just feel bad and call it a day. He read the text, made a public commitment, and aggressively dismantled the toxic structures in his society. The lesson for us is that we must zealously commit our hearts to what is right, just like Josiah did, with all our heart, soul, and strength. However, the second lesson is a deeply sobering reality check about history and consequence. The text makes it incredibly clear that while our personal righteousness is absolutely vital, our collective and historical actions, like those systemic evils committed by Manasseh, have profound, unavoidable consequences. We simply cannot erase the lasting weight of generational damage overnight, even with the absolute best intentions. It reminds us of the serious, long-term weight our actions carry for the generations that will follow us. Josiah gave absolutely everything he had to fix his nation, but history still took its toll. It leaves us to ask a really important question. Are we doing enough today to ensure that our actions don't become a burden to the generations that follow us? Thank you for learning with us. If it's helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.